I knew my sister hated me, but I didn't know how far she'd go until she slid a birthday gift across the table and laughed. A DNA test. "Maybe this will explain why you're another man's mistake," she said, loud enough for every fork to stop mid-air. I swallowed the shame, mailed the kit, and waited. Months later, our family's estate lawyer requested an urgent meeting regarding Grace Ellington. My mother went pale. Naomi stopped smiling. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. They already knew what I was about to find out. Most people picture family as a soft place to land. Mine always felt more like a house with cold floors, beautiful from the outside, freezing once you stepped in. Growing up in the Ellington home in Denver, I learned early how to make myself small. I was the quiet child, the one who did her homework without being asked, the one who disappeared into corners so my mother wouldn't sigh and my sister wouldn't sneer. Even then, Naomi's world seemed to orbit at the center of everything. She had a way of commanding attention without earning it. Loud laughter, dramatic stories, a talent for turning every room into her stage. And my mother, Evelyn, applauded her every move. When Naomi got a B on a test, she was well-rounded. When I brought home straight A's, Mom blinked like she had forgotten who I was for a moment before saying, "That's nice, Grace. Can you help set the table?" By the time I reached 35, I'd built a life far from that house. Austin suited me: quiet mornings, simple routines, the kind of stability I'd never had as a child. I worked as a financial analyst dressed in soft, neutral tones and tried not to think about the constant ache that came from being the forgotten daughter. But when my father, James Ellington, passed away, the gravity of our family pulled me back. He had been the only steady thing in that house, a man of few words, but a surprising warmth. In the small moments, a hand on my shoulder, a proud nod at my college graduation. I didn't know then that he carried a secret darker than anything I could imagine. 3 months after the funeral, Mom insisted we have a small birthday dinner at the old house. Her voice over the phone was too bright, too rehearsed, as if she were reading lines someone else had given her. When I stepped through the front door, I smelled the familiar mix of lemon polish and old books. The chandelier glowed, but the house felt emptier without Dad's quiet presence. Naomi sat at the kitchen table, flipping through resort brochures, tanned from some recent trip, barely glancing at me as I entered. Mom poured herself more wine than usual, her hands trembling slightly. Something unspoken hung in the air like a storm that hadn't broken yet. I tried asking about the will, gently, respectfully. Mom froze, her smile stiff. "We're just not ready yet," she said. But her eyes flicked to Naomi, and Naomi smirked like she knew a secret I didn't. Looking back, the dinner was never about celebrating my birthday. It was about setting the stage for my humiliation. The tension that night didn't arrive in one sharp moment. It crept in slowly, like a draft under a closed door. Every small detail felt off. Naomi kept glancing at me with this expectant look, as if she were waiting for a cue only she and my mother had rehearsed. Mom's wine glass was never empty, though she barely drank from it. Her fingers just circled the stem over and over like she needed something to hold on to. Dinner itself was a performance. Naomi talked nonstop: her job, her husband, her plans to redo her kitchen in a French farmhouse aesthetic. Mom laughed at every comment, even the unfunny ones. When I spoke, the room seemed to dim like someone turned down the volume of my existence. Halfway through the meal, Naomi leaned back, eyes glinting. "So Grace," she said sweetly, still working at that same firm in Austin. Before I could answer, she jumped back into another story about herself. It wasn't a question. It was a reminder: you are background noise. Still, something else simmered beneath her smug expression. Anticipation. Calculation. When Mom stood to bring out dessert, a small, store-bought cake she hadn't even bothered to plate, Naomi pushed back her chair dramatically. "Actually," she said, reaching for a glossy box wrapped in silver paper, "I brought a birthday gift. Something I think you'll find enlightening." Mom's face drained of color. "Naomi." But Naomi ignored her, sliding the box across the table toward me like it contained evidence instead of a present. "Go on," she said, her smile razor-thin. "Open it." I peeled back the paper, a strange stillness settling over me. Inside was a DNA testing kit. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Naomi leaned in, laughing under her breath. Maybe this will explain why you're another man's mistake in this family. The words echoed sharp and deliberate. Mom flinched. I saw it. But she said nothing. The humiliation stung, but the fear in Mom's eyes that felt like the real truth slipping through the cracks. Naomi hadn't just insulted me. She'd exposed something she wasn't supposed to say out loud. Later that night in my old bedroom, the walls still painted the soft blue I had chosen at 15. I searched through old boxes like someone looking for proof of their own existence. At the back of my closet, I found an envelope that didn't belong with the others. The dust around it had been disturbed recently. Inside was a photograph, a younger Evelyn holding me as a baby while standing next to a man I didn't recognize. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, "Forgive me." My hands shook as I took pictures of everything. Then I turned to the DNA kit Naomi had delivered like a weapon. She had wanted me to take it. She had wanted something to happen. Fine. I mailed it the next morning, not because Naomi wanted me to, but because I needed to know what truth she was so eager to weaponize. The results arrived 5 weeks later on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk in Austin, half listening to the hum of the office vents when the notification appeared on my phone. I expected dread. What I didn't expect was clarity, sharp, cold, undeniable. No biological relationship detected with the Ellington family. My breath hitched, but I kept reading. A suggested match to the Hartman lineage. A name I had never spoken, never heard, suddenly tied to me by blood. It didn't hurt the way I imagined. It felt like confirmation of something I had always sensed. I was a guest in my own childhood, never a daughter. What shook me more came next. When I sent the results to our family group chat, nothing dramatic, just a screenshot and a simple question. Does anyone want to explain this? My phone buzzed almost instantly. Mom called sobbing. Not from remorse, but from fear. "Grace, sweetheart, please delete that. You don't understand. This is complicated. Things happened a long time ago. We moved past them." She never apologized. She never addressed the decades I spent feeling like a burden in her home. She just begged me to bury the truth again. But Naomi didn't call. She texted. Just 4 words. "Well, now you know." Cold, satisfied, as if she'd been waiting half her life for the moment I discovered I didn't belong. That night, I called her, shaking with questions I didn't know how to ask. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice dripping with irritation. "Why Grace? Why now?" I demanded. "Why push this? Why humiliate me?" She laughed softly, a sound that hit like ice. "Because I've kept this family secret for 20 years. Because Mom owed me. Because you've played victim long enough. And now the right people will finally get what they deserve." She hung up. Those words clung to me like smoke. The next morning, I started asking quiet questions. I spoke to family friends, old neighbors, people who had known my parents before Naomi and I were born. What emerged chilled me. Naomi had been digging for months, meeting estate lawyers, hinting about upcoming changes, talking as if Dad's estate already belonged to her. I needed help, real help, the kind Dad would have insisted I seek. So I hired an attorney, Sarah Eng, known for her work in complicated inheritance disputes. I brought her everything: the DNA results, the photograph screenshots of Naomi's messages, the odd conversations, the fear in Mom's voice. Sarah listened, expression still taking notes like she was assembling a puzzle. "Your instincts are right," she said finally. "This isn't just resentment. Someone is building a case to erase you." 3 days later, I got the call that changed everything. Mr. Dalton, our longtime estate lawyer, sounded unusually formal. "Grace, your father left instructions for a will reading under specific circumstances. Those circumstances have now been met. I think you should be prepared for what you're going to hear." Prepared? I doubt anyone could have been. The morning of the will reading, Denver felt colder than I remembered. Not a seasonal cold, but the kind that sinks into bone, the kind that feels like a warning. Sarah and I arrived early at the downtown building where Mr. Dalton's office occupied the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dark wood, the kind of place where truths didn't hide, they echoed. We chose seats near the window, out of the direct line of fire. Sarah whispered, Observe everything. Speak only when necessary. Her calm steadiness eased the tightness in my chest. Mom arrived next. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was hastily pinned back, and she clutched her purse with both hands as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. She didn't greet me, didn't even meet my eyes. She sank into a chair at the far end of the table, staring at the polished surface, as though it might swallow her whole. Then Naomi entered. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step carrying a smug confidence that bordered on theatrical. She wore an expensive suit, cream-colored, perfectly tailored, and heavy makeup that made her look sharper, harder. And of course, she brought her own attorney, a man I recognized from billboards, boasting about aggressive estate litigation. Naomi gave me a slow smile, one corner lifted higher than the other. "Grace," she said, as if greeting someone irrelevant, but her eyes gleamed with expectation. She believed she had already won. Mr. Dalton entered last, carrying a thick folder. He moved with the deliberate calm of someone who understood the weight of what he was about to unleash. When he reached the head of the table, he rested a hand on the folder and looked at each of us one by one. Before we begin, he said, "I want to note that James Ellington left explicit instructions for how this reading should proceed. He anticipated complications. Everything I am about to share was prepared with full knowledge of circumstances that some of you may find surprising." Naomi shifted her smirk, faltering. Dalton opened the folder and began reading the will. "I, James Robert Ellington, declare this my final will and testament. I leave 70% of my estate, including the family home investment accounts and assets, to my daughter, Grace Ellington." Silence snapped across the room like a whip. Naomi shot to her feet. "She is not his daughter," she shouted. "We have DNA proof. She has no legal." Dalton held up a hand. "Please sit. There is more." Reluctantly, she did, though her jaw clenched so tightly I thought she might crack a tooth. Dalton continued reading. "I have known since Grace was 2 years old that she is not my biological child. I chose to raise her anyway. I choose to leave her my legacy because she alone has proven worthy of it. This decision requires no further validation." Naomi's complexion drained to a pasty gray. Mom closed her eyes, pain tightening her features. But Dalton wasn't finished. 8 months before his death, Mr. Ellington hired a private investigator to document any attempts to manipulate or interfere with his estate. The investigator gathered substantial evidence. He placed a stack of documents on the table: payments, withdrawals, bills, and meeting logs demonstrating Naomi Ellington's efforts to pressure her father into altering his will, including unauthorized withdrawals totaling $50,000 during his illness. Naomi's attorney stiffened. "We weren't informed Dalton cut him off. You were not required to be." Additionally, the investigation documented consultations with 3 estate lawyers, conversations about upcoming changes to the family inheritance, and the purchase of a DNA test mailed to Naomi's home address and gift-wrapped. Naomi's eyes widened. "That's ridiculous," she said, voice shaking. "That was a joke." Dalton set down the final document, a handwritten note in my father's unmistakable script. "Mr. Ellington requested that I read this aloud." He unfolded the page. "Naomi, I know what you've been planning. I watched you try to manipulate your mother. I hoped you would choose differently. These consequences are your own doing." A sound escaped Naomi's throat, part gasp, part growl. Her attorney leaned toward her. "Do not contest this," he whispered harshly. "There's a no contest clause. You will lose everything." But Naomi was spiraling. "This is fraud," she spat. "Grace manipulated him. She tricked a dying man." Sarah stood. Her voice was quiet but powerful. "The will explicitly acknowledges Grace's parentage and documents Mr. Ellington's reasoning. Any contest would be frivolous and trigger the no contest clause, including repayment of outstanding loans, approximately $200,000. Naomi's face twisted. "That's not a loan. He gave me that money." "Not according to the estate records," Dalton replied calmly. Mom finally spoke, her voice a fragile whisper. "Naomi, stop." But Naomi couldn't. Years of entitlement, bitterness, and fear collided all at once. "This should be mine," she hissed. All of it. I'm the real daughter. I'm the one who stayed. I stood slowly, my voice steady. You didn't stay, Naomi. You controlled. You threatened. You built your life on secrets you never earned. She turned toward me, wild-eyed. You don't deserve, Grace, Dalton said gently. There is something else your father left. He opened a smaller envelope addressed to me. Inside was a short letter. Grace, you spent your life believing you were invisible. You were not. I saw your strength, your kindness, your integrity. You were my daughter not by blood, but by choice, and I leave you my legacy with absolute certainty that you will honor it. My vision blurred. When I looked up, Naomi finally understood. This wasn't my victory. It was her defeat crafted by the man she underestimated most. The legal fallout came faster than anyone expected. Naomi's attorney withdrew the next morning, leaving her scrambling for someone willing to take a case that was already collapsing under its own weight. When she attempted to contest the will anyway, the judge dismissed it within minutes. The no contest clause was airtight, the evidence overwhelming. Her inheritance vanished. The loan she'd taken from Dad, $200,000, converted into personal debt, owed back to the estate. And the $50,000 in unauthorized withdrawals, she was given 1 year to repay it or face further legal action. For the first time in my life, Naomi looked small. Not humbled, just cornered by the consequences she'd always managed to outrun. Mom came to see me a week later. She sat on my Austin apartment couch, hands folded, eyes red-rimmed. She told me everything the truth about my biological father, the agreement made decades ago, the guilt she carried but never confronted. I listened, but I didn't reach for her. Some wounds required distance, not closeness. I want to make things right, she whispered. I believe you, I said. But making things right starts with letting me live without carrying your secrets. In the months that followed, I stepped back from Denver entirely. I managed the estate with Sarah's help, settled accounts, and chose quietly, deliberately, the life I wanted next. It was the first time I made a choice without asking who it might disappoint. I left Denver behind and built a quieter life in Oregon, where the lies couldn't reach me anymore. Some endings aren't loud. They're choosing peace over pain. And if you've ever been the overlooked one, know this: you deserve better than the people who failed to see you. Share your story below and subscribe for the next one.